Welcome back to our course on construction grammar. Today we're going to look at structuralism and we will explore how and why construction grammar is different from this approach. In the last sessions we've seen that construction grammar is a cognitive theory of language. The first tenet that we've seen is that the central unit of this grammar is the construction, pairings of form and meaning. And in one of the videos you've already seen that there are notational variants of how we can encode or represent this, but any construction should always have form and meaning. A second important tenet was that pattern detection and generalization, domain general principles, played a huge role in the storage of construction, because this leads to schematization, i.e. productive constructions. A final tenet that we've seen is that the lexicon and syntax are not two separate domains, but that there is a continuum between the two. Now today we want to explore in more detail how this differs from word and syntax models. Structuralist analyses, Quirk et al., the comprehensive grammar of the English language is an instance of that, assume that language basically consists of meaningful words and meaningless syntactic rules which combine the words. An immediate result of this approach is that syntax shouldn't change meaning. Let's have a look at the sentences in the table. So say you have the syntactic pattern, he cut the bread. Now cut involves a cutter and something that is cut, an agent and a patient, however you want to call the semantic roles. It's a transitive verb. The syntactic pattern which is linked to that is subject, verb, object. In contrast to this, considers, he considers Bob a friend, is a trivalent verb. It's a complex transitive verb that is associated with a pattern subject, verb, object and oblique. So he is the subject, Bob is the object, a friend is the oblique, or sometimes also called object complement. But what about firefighters cut the man free? An example that we've already come across. Cut, as we said in the first example, is a transitive verb, so it should only go into the subject, verb, object pattern. But here we've got the subject, verb, object, oblique pattern that is normally associated with consider. Now, in any approach in which you assume that syntax can't change meaning, what you basically must assume is a lexicalist approach. You must take the transitive cut in the lexicon and turn it into a complex transitive one. Now, structuralist approaches have certain problems. They restrict themselves to surface structure. And on top of that, for them, meaning plays no role in the syntax. As a result of this, you can't easily explain the difference between certain phenomena. So ambiguities, like visiting relatives can be boring, which can either mean that you visiting the relatives can be boring, or your relatives visiting you can be boring. In a surface approach, in which meaning plays no role, you can't easily explain these differences. In addition to that, this kind of approach makes it hard to find any kind of formal relationship between related constructions. So between the active, he ate the apple, and the passive, the apple was eaten. And finally, irregular morphology, like take, took, isn't easily explained. But for these, you must resort to just storage and say that these are irregular. Now, construction grammar crucially differs from this approach. Construction grammarians argue that generalization leads to schematic constructions to form meaning pairings. So you see they elected him president, she considered him a fool, he wiped the table clean, and you detect the patterns there, which leads to a construction, a form-meaning pairing. So a subject, verb, object, oblique form is linked to the meaning A causes B to become C by Ving. In an earlier video, I already talked about the number subscripts that help you identify the meaning of formal elements. So this is a completely schematic construction. It only has got slots. So subject 1 stands for A, the agent. Object 2 stands for the patient that is affected by the action. And the oblique 3 is the state, C3, which the person or the thing ends up in. So they cause him to become president by electing. He causes the table to become clean, and so on. So in these examples, lexicon and syntax are not separated. We've got the lexicon-syntax continuum. And this schema allows us to then license new productive instances, like firefighters cut the man free. So we don't need a new type of cut. What we need is this schematic construction, and then we fill the elements in there and we get the desired meaning. Firefighters cause the man to become free by Ving. So summing up, language doesn't consist of meaningful words and meaningless syntax. Language consists of constructions, form and meaning pairings. Okay, so far for our comparison to structuralist approaches. In the next session, we will look at the differences between construction grammar and generative approaches. Thank you very much for your attention. See you next time.